I don't know what you think about school bullying. A lot of people think it's just childish mischief, that kids can be cruel, but they grow up and forget, that the trauma fades when you become an adult. That's not true. The trauma doesn't fade. It hides deep inside, in the darkest corners of your soul. And it waits. It waits for a moment to remind you of its existence. I know this because I've lived through it. I lived through years of humiliation that should have broken me. Years when I heard words that destroyed my self-esteem. Years when I believed I really was what they called me. But I survived. I became stronger. And I waited for the moment when I could give it all back. Not through shouting, not through scandal, but through a quiet, cold, daily revenge that became his eternal reminder. A reminder that he was wrong, that his words had consequences, that humiliation doesn't go unpunished. My name is Kate. I'm 36 years old. I was born in a small town in Ohio. My family was poor, and I always wore old clothes that my mother altered from neighbors' hand-me-downs. I was shy, awkward, and always blushed when people looked at me. The perfect victim, the perfect target. And he was the school star, tall, handsome, with a cocky smile and golden hair. His name was Brad Harrison. He was the football team captain, the life of the party, the beloved son of wealthy parents. And he was the one who made my life unbearable. Every day, from first grade to graduation, I heard his voice. "Hey Kate, wearing that rag again? Your mom can't afford to buy you normal clothes. Kate, you're so ugly even the mirror cracks when you look into it. Kate, you're so stupid even the teachers don't want to call on you." I stayed silent. I lowered my head and waited for him to leave. I didn't answer. I didn't defend myself. I just let him do it. Because I believed he was right. I believed I really was ugly. I believed I really was stupid. I believed I didn't deserve anything good. And those words stayed with me for life. Brad wasn't alone. He had a whole entourage. His friends who echoed his jokes, who laughed at every word he said, who made my life even more unbearable. I remember one incident I'll never forget. It was in high school during chemistry class. We were sitting in pairs at lab tables. Brad and I ended up as partners. He laughed and said, "Oh no, I don't want to work with that ugly thing. Teacher, can I switch?" The whole class laughed. I sat there staring at my notebook, feeling the ground fall away beneath me. That day I swore to myself I would never be like that I would do everything to become strong, that I would prove him wrong. But that oath didn't help me then. I still remained the victim. I still felt worthless. I still cried into my pillow at night so no one would hear. In high school, I found one solace: books. I read everything I could get my hands on. Novels, history books, biographies, scientific articles. I devoured them one after another. I read about strong women who overcame adversity. I read about how they became successful despite everything. I read and dreamed that one day I too would become like that. But I didn't believe I could, because Brad's voice was too loud. It drowned out all my dreams. It told me, "You're nobody. You'll never achieve anything. You'll always be that ugly, stupid Kate." And I believed him. Graduation was my liberation. I got my diploma, got on a bus, and left for another city, Columbus, to a big college where no one knew me. I started a new life. I stopped being a victim. I became a straight-A student. I worked nights to pay for my education. I didn't pay attention to guys who tried to flirt with me. I was afraid they'd see the same insecure girl I'd left behind. I built a wall around myself, high, strong, impenetrable. I let no one in. I was alone, but I was free. I felt safe. I graduated with honors, got a degree in economics, joined a small startup, worked like crazy, climbed the corporate ladder. 10 years later, I became a vice president at a major corporation. I had a house, a car, money. I was successful. I was confident. I was someone no one could break. I thought I'd left the past behind. I thought I'd forgotten Brad. I thought his words no longer had power over me. I was wrong. They still lived inside me. They still echoed in my head. They still influenced my decisions, my relationships, my life. I didn't know how to get rid of them. I didn't know how to close that chapter. But I knew that sooner or later I'd meet him again. And when I did, I'd be ready. I met him 20 years later. It was at an interview. I was sitting at my desk when my secretary announced, "Ma'am, a candidate for the financial analyst position is here, Brad Harrison." I froze. I stared at the door, unable to believe it. Brad Harrison. The same Brad Harrison. The football captain. The one who made my life hell. He'd come to me for an interview. He didn't know it was me. He didn't know I was that same Kate he'd called ugly and stupid. He didn't know I was the one he'd humiliated all through school. He just walked in with a polished smile, briefcase in hand, and said, "Hello, my name is Brad Harrison. I'm here for the interview." I looked at him and couldn't breathe. He was older, grayer, heavier. He wasn't the handsome guy I remembered. He was just an ordinary middle-aged man. But I recognized him. I recognized his smile. I recognized his voice. I recognized him. And I knew this was my chance. My chance for justice. My chance to take back everything he'd stolen from me. My chance to show him he was wrong. I smiled and said, "Have a seat, Brad. Tell me about yourself." He started talking about his work, his experience, his achievements. He spoke smoothly, confidently. But I heard his words. I heard him trying to impress me. I heard his insecurity. I heard his fear. I realized he hadn't changed. He was still the same arrogant guy who was used to getting whatever he wanted. But now he was in my office. And he depended on me. I listened and thought about how much he owed me. He owed me years of pain. He owed me years of humiliation. He owed me years of fear. And I decided I would collect. I decided I wouldn't forgive him. I decided I'd make sure he remembered this day forever. I hired him. Not because he was talented. Not because he was needed. But because I wanted to see him every day. I wanted to look at him and remember how he humiliated me. I wanted to give his words back to him every single day. I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted him to understand what it's like to be nobody. What it's like to be humiliated. What it's like to be broken. And I began. From the very first day, I started using his old phrases. In meetings I'd say, "Brad, this job is too difficult for you." In memos I'd write, "Brad, you're not handling this. Your hands aren't steady enough for this work." When he made a mistake, I'd say, "Brad, you're too stupid for this." He didn't understand what was happening. He thought I was just a strict boss. He didn't know I was repeating his own words, the words he'd said to me 20 years ago. And every time I watched him break a little more, I watched his confidence melt. I watched him start to doubt himself. I watched him become the very victim I once was. He tried to understand. He'd come to me and say, "Ma'am, I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. Why are you so cold to me?" I'd smile and say, "Brad, you just don't know how to work. You're not cut out for this position. But I'm giving you a chance. Try harder." He'd walk away, confused. He felt persecuted. He felt hated. But he couldn't understand why. He couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. And that made him even more vulnerable. He started losing confidence. He started making mistakes. He started falling apart. He was becoming what I used to be. He became a victim. And that was my revenge. 3 months passed. 3 months during which I watched Brad slowly crumble. I could see it in his eyes, his posture, his voice. He was no longer the confident guy who'd walked into the interview with a briefcase and a polished smile. He'd become a shadow of himself. He was afraid to speak in meetings, afraid to make decisions, afraid to make mistakes. He was broken, and I felt a strange feeling growing inside me. Not satisfaction, not joy, but something like liberation. I wasn't doing this to torment him. I was doing it to free myself. To free myself from the pain he'd caused me. To free myself from the words he'd spoken. To free myself from the fear he'd planted in me. I used his old phrases every day. They became my ritual, my way of giving back the pain he'd given me. At morning meetings I'd say, "Brad, this task is too difficult for you. Maybe you should take a break while I find someone more competent." In memos I'd write, "Brad, you've made another mistake. Your hands aren't steady enough for this work. Try redoing this from scratch." When he brought me reports, I'd look at them and say, "You're too stupid for this job, Brad. I don't know why I hired you." He'd stand before me with his head down, unable to say anything. I could see his hands trembling. I could see him fighting back tears. I could see him breaking. And I felt no pity, only justice. He tried to understand. He'd come to me after meetings and say, "Ma'am, I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. I'm trying. I work overtime. I do everything you ask. Why are you so cold to me?" I'd look at him with a faint smile and say, "Brad, you just don't know how to work. You're not cut out for this position. But I'm giving you a chance. Try harder." He'd walk away, confused. He'd walk away feeling his confidence melt away day by day. He felt hated, but he couldn't understand why. He couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. And that made him even more vulnerable. He started losing confidence. He started making mistakes. He started falling apart. He was becoming what I once was. He became a victim, and that was my revenge. On the 4th month, he broke. It happened at a meeting. We were discussing a project, and I asked him to present his calculations. He stood up, walked to the projector, and started speaking. His voice trembled. His hands shook. He got the numbers wrong. He stammered. At one point he stopped and said, I can't do this anymore. He sat back down and cried. Right in front of all his colleagues. Right in front of me. Everyone stared at him in confusion. No one understood what had happened. Only I knew. Only I knew I had done this. I'd made him weak. I'd made him broken. I'd made him nothing. And I felt no guilt, only relief. After the meeting, he came to my office. He was pale, his eyes red. He sat across from me and said, I know what you're doing. You're doing this on purpose. You want to destroy me. But I don't understand why. What did I ever do to you? I looked at him and said nothing. I thought about how many years I'd waited for this moment. How many times I'd wanted to tell him the truth. How many times I'd wanted to see him broken. And now I could. I could tell him everything. I could show him who I was. I could break him even more. And I decided it was time. I stood up from my desk, walked to the window and said, Do you remember school, Brad? Do you remember the little girl you humiliated every day? Do you remember how you called her ugly and stupid? Do you remember how you laughed at her? He stared at me in confusion. He didn't understand. What do you mean? He asked. I turned to him and said, I'm that girl, Brad.
I'm Kate.
The same Kate you called ugly and stupid. The same Kate you humiliated all through school. I changed. I became strong. I became successful. I became someone you could never imagine. And now I'm your boss. I give you tasks you can't handle. I repeat your own words back to you. I'm making you broken. Because you deserve it. You deserve every humiliation I've caused you. You deserve every tear I made you shed. You deserve everything I've done to you. Because you made me this way. You made me strong. And now you'll pay for it. He sat there staring at me in horror. I watched his face go pale. I watched his hands tremble. He tried to speak but couldn't. Finally, he whispered, Kate, I didn't know. I didn't know it was you. I didn't know. I cut him off. You didn't know. You never knew. You never knew how your words affected people. You never knew how your actions affected lives. You were blind, Brad. And now you see. You see that I became strong. You see that I became successful. You see that I became everything you'll never be. And you're suffering. You're suffering because I became more than you. And that makes you weak. That makes you worthless. That makes you what I used to be. And that's justice. He cried. He fell to his knees and started begging for forgiveness. Kate, please forgive me. I was stupid. I was cruel. I was young and foolish. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm begging you, give me a chance. I'll change. I'll do whatever you say. Just don't destroy me. Please. I looked down at him. I saw his tears, his desperation, his humiliation. And I felt no pity, no sympathy. Only emptiness. The emptiness after I'd done what I needed to do. I won't forgive you, Brad. I can't forgive you. You destroyed my life. You stole my confidence. You stole years of happiness from me. You don't deserve forgiveness. But I don't want to torment you anymore. I just want you to leave. Leave my life. Leave my company. Leave my world. I want to forget you ever existed. He stood up. He stood before me with his head down. I could see him fighting back tears. He whispered, I'll leave. I'll resign. But I'm asking you for one thing. I need a reference. I can't find a job without a reference. Please write me a reference. I looked at him and smiled. I'll write you a reference, Brad. I'll write you a reference you'll never forget. I sat down at my desk and wrote. Brad Harrison worked at our company for 3 months. During that time, he proved himself to be an incompetent, insecure, and emotionally unstable employee. He was unable to handle even the simplest tasks. He was unable to build relationships with colleagues. He was unable to fulfill his duties. I do not recommend him for employment in any company. However, I would like to note that Brad is an excellent example of how humiliation and cruelty come back to haunt a person. He humiliated me in school, and now I humiliate him. This is a good example of how karma works. Do not repeat his mistakes. I put the letter in an envelope and handed it to him. He read it and went pale. Kate, you can't do this. This will destroy my career. You can't. I cut him off. I can, Brad. I can do anything. Have you forgotten who I am? I'm the one you called worthless. I'm the one who became your boss. I'm the one who now decides your fate. And I've decided your career is over. Go. Live with it. Remember every day that your words have consequences. And that I am your consequence. He left. I was alone. I stood by the window and looked out at the city. I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. I felt myself becoming lighter. I felt myself becoming freer. I had freed myself from him. I had freed myself from the past. I had freed myself from the pain. I was no longer a victim. I was a winner. I never saw Brad again. He resigned and left town. I don't know where he is now. I don't want to know. I just want to forget he ever existed. But I will always remember that day he knelt and begged for forgiveness. I will always remember the power I felt. And I will always remember that I did this, not out of cruelty, but out of justice. Not out of hatred, but out of love for myself. Not out of revenge, but out of liberation. If you've been humiliated, if you've heard words that tried to destroy you, remember, you are stronger than those words. You are stronger than the people who say them. You can rise. You can change. You can become who you want to be. Don't let anyone define your worth. You define your own worth. I did it. You can too. Subscribe to the channel if you also believe that every person can rise after falling. Share in the comments how you dealt with humiliation. It would mean a lot to know I'm not alone. Hit like if my story resonated with you. And remember, you are stronger than you think. Even when you feel broken, you can rise. That was my path. Could be yours too. Bye for now.